Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. This is part 2 of our interview with Mike Spinnler. It's fantastic. Great stories, insights into the world of running at the international level, and some behind-the-scenes looks at some great stuff. Enjoy. Our guest today started running when he was a kid. He jumped right past marathon into an ultramarathon to start. After doing some running, he's had an extensive coaching career at everything from high school levels all the way up through many US national teams that competed internationally. Lots of awards, coach of the year, coached lots of All-Americans, national champions, a lot to reflect on all the way back for the last 50 some years. Welcome today on the podcast, Mike Spinnler. I've coached lots of different sports, so you get to see it from a different angle. But I certainly relate, having done a lot of community theater as an actor. When I started directing, I had the same exact experience of what is the point of being behind the stage? Nobody appreciates, but the thrill of seeing people do things, grow their belief in themselves and do things they didn't think capable of or accomplish their goals. Yeah, that is just crazy. The only other one thing I want to sneak in is tell you I got to run with Ron Hill. So, did you? Okay, I want to hear your Ron Hill story. He came over to Cairo long after he was still on his streak. Yeah. I was living in Egypt, and he came over on here's a free plane ticket, wear a t-shirt, take your wife and go to Egypt. And so we ran the Cairo half marathon, and I took him to the Hash House Errors run.
Oh, wow. So you had mine was in races. 79, the now defunct Baltimore Marathon. Well, the Maryland Marathon, they called it, 1979. And he was past it a little bit, not too much, because he was in the top 10 at Munich in 72. He just missed. He was fourth in their Olympic trials in 76, but in 79, he was a master. I believe he was like 41 or so in that range, and he was in the slowdown process and just turned 21. And I made the conscious decision that I wasn't really worried about what my finishing time was. I wanted to see what it felt like to run with Ron Hill. And so I ran 11 miles with him at the Maryland Marathon, 1979. Then you fast forward to the 100th Boston in 1996. So he's in his late 50s. I want to say he's 57 years old at the time. And that year's Boston, I unofficially retired from the elite level. I no longer ran 100 miles a week or trained twice a day after 1990. Once Buzz started grooming me for JFK director, and I kept running fast enough to qualify for Boston. So the Boston Marathon, 1996, and I think they expanded the field. They had people coming in from the sides, whatever the race management procedures were at that point. I'm running down the road, and all the former champions were wearing a number on the back of the year they won. And I'm coming up on a little guy, and it's 1970. I'm going, that's Ron Hill. And I talked to him, and I don't know how many people around there knew that the significance of that number was that it was Ron Hill. So I ran, 4 or 5 miles with him, and we were going along at 7:30 pace or 7:20 pace, whatever it was. It was really fun. But at that point, I wasn't a master yet. I was 37 years old, but I retired from elite level running, and it was just really an enjoyable experience to reflect back on my life, because when I first got into it, he wins the 1974 Maryland Marathon. And I was in the race, finishing in 3 hours and 40 couple minutes, whatever it was. So it was really cool to share a couple of steps on the Boston Marathon course with him.
Yeah, well, we had this marathon trying to organize it in Cairo, and the logistics then of the way that place operated were a bit of a mess. They had really trouble with access and water stock. Everything was a bit of a mess. But then after the race, said, you want to run some more? We'll go to the Hash House Harriers run the desert. I had a station wagon. I was with Peugeot 504. I'd drive around and pick up a whole bunch of people going to the Hash, and the car was jam full, and Ron had to run. It's all right, put my wife in the front seat. I'll ride under the hatchback. So he laid the back.
You gotta be kidding.
No, he laid down and closed. Said, okay, it's only about 25 minutes. You'll be good. Closed the hatch on him. The rest of the people didn't really know who he was, and we did that. And he got to sit upright on the way home. But
Such a cool guy. For students of the sport, I love to do trivia with people. Track and field trivia. I always said Jeopardy had the track and field trivia as all their categories. I'm the richest man in the world.
You crank out the times to the second of athletes you coach, your own race is pretty fun. Yeah.
Let me tell you, I can remember splits from races 50 years ago. But with Ron Hill, people remember when the people were to talk about barefoot running is the best way to go. And they only remember Bibi Bikila. Bibi Bikila still has the fastest marathon ever run without shoes. The 2:15 that he ran to win in Rome. Ron Hill ran barefoot in the 10,000 meters in Mexico City. And they said, bull crap. I said, find the video, look. And I believe he was seventh. I believe he finished seventh in the Olympic 10,000 meters at the altitude of Mexico City, and he's not wearing shoes. When they talk about people inventing the barefoot running and they go, oh, no, there was a European racing without shoes on a synthetic surface. Yeah, he pretty was a cool guy. I was really bummed when he didn't make the 1976 Olympic team. I was watching for the results, and Barry Watson made the team. And Barry Watson was one of these club runners who ran a 2:15 on the right day and pulled off this kind of like our Ron Dawes. He was the self-made Olympian over there. But years later, I ended up becoming friends with him. He knew Coach Fisher, my British coach, back in the spring of 1980. And Coach Fisher says, oh, yeah, I know Barry Watson, blah, blah. So he put me in contact with him, and we've communicated quite a bit over the years. Matter of fact, one year during the JFK, he was watching the live stream, and we were going back and forth with communications. I mean, my duties on race day are minimal at this point with my staff. So I was able to go back and forth with Barry Watson, the guy who beat Ron Hill for third place in the British Olympic trials in 1976. It was really fun, you know.
That's crazy. Let's talk about some of the background to a couple of things you've been involved in. One with the coaching, but let's talk about the club and the role of running clubs. It's a big topic from like this running in the 70s and on, how, of course, the British running clubs are a whole different league, but the clubs in the States made such a difference in the lives of the athletes. Well, by the time you got involved, in a very established Cumberland Valley, what's the budget, what's the capacity, and what's the succession plan you thought of when you took over and said, okay, I'm going to be doing this probably till I can't? How did all that work?
I got to tell you, going back to when Buzzword formed the Cumberland Valley Athletic Club in 1960, he formed it to assist these high school athletes with their off-season training.
Right.
By the end of the 60s and the early 70s, he didn't say goodbye to those athletes once they came out of high school and they came back. Like Elton Hurst won the JFK when he was 25 as a post-collegiate. He continued. Now, as far as fundraising, they charged a little entry fee for these little summer events. And I got to tell you, Buzz never married. Buzz never had children. Buzz had a very nice income as a draftsman for Mack Trucks. And I didn't know this, and nobody knew this until years later, but he was basically financially supporting. He kept the JFK alive. He ate all the losses of the JFK. He financed the Cumberland Valley Athletic Clubs and those kids when he sent the team up to the national championships up in Boston for cross country, that type of stuff. And it's so cool to see these old results with these CVAC athletes competing against the best runners in the country of that era. Buzz was paying for that out of his pocket and quietly doing so, and never told anyone that the JFK was finishing in the red every year and that he was closing that gap. He was paying off those bills. I never knew it.
You find out.
I tell you how I found out when the books got turned over to me when I became the director. I was like, holy moly. And now me and my wife had just got married. We got married in 93. I took over the directorship in 93. Actually, officially, Buzz handed me the keys to the storage trailer after the last finisher in November of 92. And then I started doing the work. But when I got to see the books, I was like, this don't add up. This doesn't add up. You're not going to be able to cover expenses with the engine. And I'm looking, I'm going, Buzz was eating that. Buzz was quietly keeping the race afloat, paying it off. And Buzz never wanted to have sponsors. And I respect him on this because he didn't want to have to be a salesman or, hey, you want to wear this shoe or you want to eat this supplement or whatever. But I looked at it was kind of like survival. I put Gatorade right away, and they've been very good to us for 30 plus years. And I went to shoe companies right away, and I went to local car dealerships, and I went to the local lawyer. The only mistake I ever made was I went to a local brewery, and I got sponsorship from them, and I got crucified by our fields because we were supposed to be about wholesomeness and athleticism and physical fitness. You can't have an alcohol or a tobacco sponsor. And I was like, oops.
Right.
I was so happy that I went to that alcohol distributor. He actually helped me and Terry Baker out over our post-collegiate careers. He'd helped us with sponsorship. And I said, his name is Hiram Watts from Watts Distributors. It was an Anheuser-Busch distributor. And I said, Hiram, I really appreciate you doing this for us, but I can't take your sponsorship next year. And he fully understood with a smile on his face. That's how I had to pay the bills. Because I'm looking, if we do it like Buzz did it, we're going to lose our house.
Yeah.
So we had.
You weren't the only race that had tobacco and alcohol sponsors for a while. Yeah. That's where the money was.
In college, I took some business classes because my dad encouraged me to do so. It helped me a little bit, but there was no road race management curriculum when I was going to college in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So we were learning it on the fly. And I got to tell you, Phil Stewart, he literally wrote the book on road race management. He's been directing Cherry Blossom for decades. And he really literally wrote the book. And we started subscribing to Phil's stuff, started learning from him on how to budget a race and do this and do that. And gosh, he's been so helpful to me over the years. He's so gracious. And he actually came and did the JFK a few years ago, like when he was 70. And quietly, he was an Olympic trials qualifier in 1972. This legendary coach and a legendary race director of the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, one of the most prominent races in the country, if not the world. And just the coolest guys. So we learned on the fly. But and Buzz had to do the same thing. I bet 99 people out of 100, when they saw the financial situation of JFK, would have let it die. I'm sure most of the other events that were not held again in 1964, 65, of these hundreds of JFK challenges were probably for financial reasons. A Bath last year, we're not going to do that again. And so I have no idea how many tens of thousands of dollars that Buzz Sawyer out of his own pocket must have put into the JFK over those decades to keep it afloat and never told anybody.
Yeah, now it can survive. Yeah. What about you in terms of identity as a coach? So you're a kid, you're a 3-sport athlete, you become a runner in 11th grade, you get hooked.
Yeah.
An ultra runner, and the coaching slides in, you get a family. How about identity as a coach and coach athlete? And how did that in your psyche change? And yet the vision, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I tell you, most athletes, and they're reluctant, they do not want to see their career come to an end. They want it to go. A lot of 20-year-olds, I'm going to do it until I'm 25 and then push it back to 30. And generally, it's lack of results or injury that take you out of this sport. Now, I got to tell you, when people say when you gravitated into an ultra runner, the term ultra marathon did not exist in 1971. And there was very few races around the country, period. And by 71, it was the 9th JFK, and it was a foot race. And that's all we saw it as. It just happened to be a 50-mile foot race. We were too naive, the general public, and the people in this area to think, well, aren't there 50-mile races everywhere? So it wasn't like any great thing. It wasn't like any extraordinary different thing. That it was just a foot race. You went, you signed up, you paid your entry fee, you signed a waiver, or your parents signed a waiver, you got a cardboard number from Gil, you pinned it on, and Buzz climbed up on top of his Rambler and shot a gun. So when did you evolve into a runner? How did you get into ultra? It was the foot race. It was the closest race to my house. And that's all it was. And everybody's doing it. And I wasn't the only one. There was other kids in my Boy Scout troop. There was other kids in my junior high school that were doing it. Very few of them finished. And we were like considered tough guys. I was this pale-skinned, red-haired kid that most girls didn't pay attention to in school. And all of a sudden, I was a tough guy because I finished that 50-mile race that everybody else dropped out of. That's how it was. But as far as that coaching identity thing, and I was pushing it off. I won JFK Dream Race in 82. 83, January 1st, I signed a sponsorship deal with Brooks. Brooks sends me down to the Mardi Gras Marathon. I run really well. There was a headwind that year instead of a tailwind. I finished 6th against a really good field. Things are clicking. Everything's going great. I get a real job that allowed me to train. It was 25 hours a week. The junior college knew what I was trying to do. I had run for them, and they gave me a very easy, it wasn't physically demanding job. I was assistant facilities coordinator with the athletic complex at the college. It allowed me time to train in the morning. I could train with those college athletes in the afternoon. I'd get home at a decent hour, and I had benefits. So it really helped me out. And then I had a part-time job with the local newspaper. They learned of my knowledge of the sport. They were fascinated. So they had me covering local running. And even though I was still an elite athlete, they had me covering the sport. was a little uncomfortable sometimes and I purposely left myself out of most write-ups. But if we were sending a team to the Boston Marathon, I had to include my name in the article. I hadn't really seen myself as a coach yet, but there I was on those afternoons that I was running rabbit with the guys, or I was helping the girls with their long run or whatever it was, these college athletes. And little by little over that year, and I got a bad injury. I was having a problem. My foot wasn't feeling right. And I remember the day, it was December 26, 1983. Jeff Scuffins, who ended up running 2:14:01 in the marathon and was running on scholarship at Clemson. Terry Baker, who was one of the top 10 ranked American marathon runners, and me are running on the day after Christmas. And a car slid on the ice. Jeff jumped left. Terry jumped right. I jumped up, and the car hit me. And I didn't think it was anything significant. I just, oh man, my calf. Ouch, that really hurt. And then my calf turned black and blue from internal damage. And my father took me to the emergency room, and he was really pissed with the guy who hit me. I had to get surgery. It was my first. So I had to get surgery, and I was out for months on crutches, riding the exercise bike. And that's when I really got into the coaching. That spring of 84, when I couldn't be an athlete. And I was trying to help Rob Devlin qualify for the Nationals. Rob Devlin ended up making the Olympic trials in the year 2000, helping him qualify for the national championships in the 5,000 meters indoors, or helping the female athletes we have trying to qualify and that type of thing. So I really got into it. And that's when my dad said, it's time. I know you wanted to wait until you were 30 to get into coaching, but now it's time. And I said, you're right. So that's when I took the GREs, the graduate records exam. Erdman had always told me I got a spot down here as a graduate assistant coach if you want to do that. And that's what I did. So I finished up the year with Bo at Hagerstown Junior College and got used to the title of Coach Spinnler. And then there I was down there in Eastern Kentucky in the fall of 1984, and Coach Erdman had delegated that cross-country team to me. I was 20.
And you were a full-time student?
Yes, I was a graduate student.
Okay, that's
what a GAA is. They pay for you. They give you a little living stipend to pay for your rent and food and stuff. Here I was. Coach Erdman kind of delegated. I was 25 going on 26. I was going to turn 26 that fall. But hey, I'm going to let you do this. Now, I'm going to step in if I think you're screwing up. And I was literally coaching guys. Some of those Europeans on the team were older than me. But we won the OVC championships that fall. And I was getting healthy enough to get back running again. But I was never the same. And by then, I'd really transitioned. I tried to make, how athletes are. I tried to make a bunch of comebacks between 85 and 1990 and never quite got there. And by 1990, I had a heart-to-heart with myself and said, I'm 32 years old. This is what needs to be your priority. You've already promised Buzz you're going to take over as the head administrator of JFK. Now it's time to make that conscious decision that you're, like my student athletes, they're student first, athlete second. Then I was coach athlete. And I ran the local races, and I might break 3 hours in the marathon off 50 miles a week and qualify for Boston so I can accompany my athletes up there. But at that point, I had accepted that role and felt very comfortable in that role and thought it was a very honorable thing to do. Looked at those coaches that I admired so much through my ranks, Coach Messina, my first high school cross country coach, Coach Martin, my first track coach, and then Rick Erdman at Hagerstown Junior College, and then Bob Lewis at Frostburg State, and then Dick Fisher, who amazing British coach who I got to work under for a semester. I always admired these guys. I thought they were really good people. And kind of the joke is, hey, you're not going to get rich off being a college coach. You're going to live a modest lifestyle. So they were doing it for the right reasons, for these noble reasons, and not that you had the same prestige as a doctor or a lawyer or a minister. But I like that. I like that title. I liked when people called me Coach Spinnler. I felt that it was a noble thing that I was doing.
You spent just the 1 year at Eastern Kentucky to get your degree, and you coached at the college level. You coached lots of high schools.
Yeah.
And let me just talk about your one recognition award, Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
What was different about that year?
And Greg Shank, my coach, ended up taking over the program at Hagerstown Junior College. And then in 1993, he became the head coach there. He was the distance coach. Then he became the head coach. He said, hey, why don't you and Maria come out and be my assistant coaches? And we thought, oh, my gosh, this is incredible. I'm going back to my old junior college. I've been out of college coaching for a while. and be Greg's assistant. So Greg did it for 2 more years. And then he turned the program over to me in the fall of 95. And Maria became my number 1 assistant. And then I had a very sharp local coach named Andy Reed, who was a multi guy. So he knew the pole vault. He knew the throws. He knew the hurdles. He knew the horizontal and vertical jumps. The 3 of us had some great success. And our sprinters were coached by a guy named Bob Bowen. They still are. Bob Bowen is in his 70s, still coaching our sprinters. And Bob had worked with John Smith out in California. Like Bob worked with Otto Bolden for a while back in the 90s. So this guy's on my coaching staff. So I had this amazing coaching staff. Maria is a former US National team member, Olympic trials qualifier, 10-year pro. I got this guy who was a Division I football player who also knew decathlon, who was coaching my field. I got this sprint coach who worked under John Smith. I've got this amazing coaching staff. So we go out to the indoor meet and we make a very nice showing and a rounded showing. We're scoring in the jumps, the throws, the middle distance, the sprints, the long distances. So I get National Coach of the Year, which is a team award, okay? It's to the coaching staff. They put your name on the award, but I never really kind of liked that type of deal. So they named me National Coach of the Year, indoor track for women, 1997, which is like a cool honor because Stan Naruski, the legendary coach from Clemson, who's coached many Olympians, he won the men's. And actually, we were standing next to each other because I always stand next to Stan Naruski at the indoor meets. Anytime we were at a national meet, I would stand next to coaches who I thought could get to a higher level, that I'd hear him say something or mentor me in some way. And Stan liked me. Stan liked me because he coached Terry Baker. He at Auburn. He coached Jeff Scuffins at Clemson. And he liked Greg Shank. He got to know Greg Shank at these meets as well. So I'm standing next to Stan, and they announce him as the man's coach of the year. Then 32 seconds later, they announced me. So it was really cool to be standing there and be in the same circle with the legendary Stan Naruski. That's a real fond memory. But I had this coaching staff, was incredible. And it was a great recruiting tool. When we talked to these kids that we were talking to, it was like, yeah, we're a junior college, but we have an amazing coaching staff. And I followed a very similar philosophy to Erdman. We weren't running against junior colleges unless we had to at the Maryland State JUCO meet, the regional meet, the national meet. All the rest of the time, he's going head-to-head whenever he can against Penn State, Villanova, George Mason, University of Maryland, Naval Academy. Every chance he could get, he was going head-to-head with these major NCAA Division I programs. And we've kind of continued to do the same thing, to go to big-time meets, to give our kids a chance at really good facilities, really good competition. And I always tell them, I said, the best way to sell yourself is not your high school results. What the coach says, I wonder what this 3,200 guy can do at 5,000 or 10,000. When you line up in that 5,000 and beat their guys on scholarship, guess what's going to happen? My phone's going to ring that evening. We've had a very similar. It's worked out real well. And not that, you know what, somebody says, oh, time flies. No, it doesn't. 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours to a day, 365 days to a year, except in leap years, then there's 366. Time doesn't fly. It goes by methodically. But sometimes you'll look back and you go, wow. Like one of the guys who helps me with the JFK 50 mile is Tim Mason. He just turned 45 years old. And I'm blinking my eyes. I'm going, was it really 25 years ago that he won the National Junior College Indoor 5,000, out kicking Iliad Najubi from Kenya? But that's how it goes.
I don't think this was a big milestone, and it certainly gotten there by the time you were there. The JUCO Marathon Championship. Was that always from first time you were involved at the same event, or was that a separate event from the track?
There's a great history at Hagerstown Junior College, now Community College, with the NJCAA Marathon. Terry Baker won the very first. Ron Gunn, this incredible, legendary, still coaching coach at Southwest Michigan, he got the brainchild of having a National Junior College Marathon. And NJCAA approved it. They had it out there in Dowagiac, Michigan. Terry Baker gets driven out there by Coach Erdman, and he runs 2:28:48 and wins the race. So that was 1974. 4 years later, Coach Erdman brings me out. It's the pinnacle of my 2 years at Hagerstown Junior College. And I was in pretty good shape. Back then, hour runs were pretty popular. Hour runs, how far could you go on an hour run on the track? And I broke our track record. I did 11 miles, 202 yards. So Erdman takes me out, and this junior college is 1978. And we're talking strategy the night before. He says, what do you think you can run? I said, based upon my training and based upon this hour run where I came through 10 miles in 53:43, And based on the predicted weather, I think I can run 6-minute pace, maybe a little faster. I'm thinking 2:36. And he has last year's results. He looks at it, he says, you run 2:36, you got a real good chance making the top 6, making All-American. And then he says it'd probably take about 2:28 to win the thing. Because somehow he plants in my seed that, you know what, maybe I'm in 2:28 shape, like Terry Baker was, and maybe I can win this thing. And I'm saying, I'll play it out. I'll try to be smart. I'm 19 years old. I did everything but play it smart. The lead pack goes through 2 miles, and I can remember it was 12 flat. And there's probably 40 guys in the lead pack because we're not running very fast. And right up there in front, and they go 12 flat. And I'm going, that's not even 2:36 pace. That's 2:37 and change pace. So I pick it up and I take the lead. And I'm clicking along. I'm thinking, okay, 2:28 pace, 5:40s. I'm going to start clicking 5:40s. I feel fine. And I'm clicking off, and they let me go. And they started at 8 a.m., but the temperature's rising. And by 6 miles, I'm off the front. It's just me chasing the lead vehicles. And those guys are probably 45 seconds behind. By 10 miles, I'm 56 minutes and change, and I'm leading. And I'm like, this is pretty simple. Terry Baker won it. I'm going to win it. 11 and a half miles. I get passed by 8 guys in a pack. I go from first to ninth in about 6 steps. In that pack was Dick Beardsley, Malcolm East, the great British runner who placed in the top 5 at the Boston Marathon in 1981.
A bunch of other ACC guys, too.
Yeah, there's guys out of Allegheny, out of Pittsburgh. There's superstars who won. Malcolm won the race that day. I want to say 2:27 and change. They won the team title. This was June of 1978. And Malcolm came by me, and we're Facebook friends now. And he tapped me on the butt. He said, hang in there, mate. He knew that I'd made a stupid mistake. And I walked and jogged. I wouldn't quit. Crossed the finish line in 3 hours and 3 minutes. It was so humiliating. And it was a silent drive on the way home. Coach Erdman was disappointed for me, but he was also pissed at me. Like, why did you break out of the pack and go on your own and do that? I was like, I'm 19. I'm stupid. I made a mistake. But always became a goal of mine as a coach to go back to the JUCO championships and make a mark and make something significant. In 1984, I brought a team out. And 3 guys who had never run a marathon before, they all broke 3 hours. One ran 2:38 on a warm day, Chris Smith. Frankie Lum ran 2:45, and Dave Long ran 2:58. And they placed in the top 10 in the team score. I was like, that was pretty significant. It was quite an accomplishment. And so then my path went different ways in Eastern Kentucky, and then trying to make a comeback. And then when I finally got back into collegiate coaching in 93 under Greg Shank, I thought, okay, let's send a team. Greg wasn't too keen on it because the timing of it was in June. So you had cross country peak in November.
Right after the end of track.
Yeah, and
a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks.
Usually a couple, 3 weeks. And it didn't really fit. And it was always going up to Michigan. And it was June. And it didn't matter where you were going in June, it was going to be a hot weather event. And he didn't think that was the best circumstance for an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid to have his first marathon be a warm weather marathon. But we know, hey, me and Greg, we agreed to disagree. But I didn't take anybody until after I became head coach. So in 97, I took a group of guys out. And one of the fellows, Brian Sellers, a walk-on from Frederick High School, 22 miles away from campus. He runs great. He's got great aptitude. They did everything. They were trained really well. We prepared for the heat, the old Benji Durden fashion. He's cutting through the field. He passes a guy named Abdurraham to go into 4th place and get 4th place at the Junior College Championships, make All-American. Now, when you look at Abdi's marathon record, he has conveniently left that off his chart. But he ran the 1997 National Junior College Marathon Championships held in East Lansing, Michigan, and died. He wasn't prepared, whatever it was. He's walking and jogging it in. But that was the first marathon. He went out to all that great Olympic glory, making how many U.S. Olympic teams? I believe 4, might have been 5 Olympic teams made. But his first marathon, he got passed 4th place by a walk-on 10:22 miler at a Frederick High School by the name of Brian Sellers. So that's what we did. And then 3 years later, I had a nice group of guys. Tim Mason wins the indoor 5,000, gets 3rd in the outdoor 10,000. Alex McAbee, whose dad had run for Hagerstown Junior College 30 years prior, had placed in the indoor and got 8th in the indoor 5,000, got 7th in the outdoor 10,000. Then we had a guy named Dougie Oates. He reminded me of a big old East German. He was 6'1", wide shoulders, didn't look like a runner, but tough as nails. So those 3 guys, we went out, and I thought, you know what? It's road racing rules. 5 guys in the team, 3 guys score. If we don't screw up, we got a really good chance. I think South Plains had a good team. A couple of those teams from Illinois were pretty sharp. But I thought, on paper, if we don't screw up, we'll win this thing. And we did. Alex Maccabee, his goal, his race plan. Tim's race plan was to stick on 6-minute pace exactly. Warm weather marathon. Do not go faster than 6-minute pace. You get the 20 miles, you assess. If you feel good, you can pick it up. If not, just hang on. Maccabee was slightly slower. His was 2:02. Maccabee used to be 2:02, once again, assessed. I thought Tim would run about 2:36. I thought Maccabee would run about 2:40. And I thought Doug Oates would be in the 2:45 range. And I thought that would be enough to win the team time. Not by a lot, but I thought it would. And it was warm. It was warm. I'm out there on the bicycle, and I'm sweating on the bicycle. Mason goes through in 2 hours. I'm talking flat. It might have been 15 seconds. And then I said, I'll be up to you a little bit, Tim. I want to see how Alex is doing. So I stayed there at 20 miles. Maccabee came by, and I remember calling the split to him. 2:01.59, 2:02 flat. I had told him to go through 20 miles and 2:02 flat. He came through the second. And I said to Tim, how you feeling? He said, yeah, I'm hurting a little bit. I said, just try to maintain. I said, Alex, how you feel? He says, I feel great, coach. I said, go ahead and pick it up. So I ride up to Tim. I catch him at 22 miles. I tell him, Maccabee is 2 minutes, 1 minute and 45 seconds behind you. Everything's looking good. Doug's running great. We're running fine. I slide back to Maccabee. He dropped it from 6:06 pace to sub 5:30s. And I'm going, you got to be careful. He says, Coach, I feel great. He's wearing a pair of hand-sewn Brooks racing shoes that Brooks had given me years earlier. I saved in a box. He's wearing my handmade, hand-sewn. They never retailed. They never released to the public. They were only given to Brooks athletes. And I let him wear the shoes. I go up to Tim. I catch Tim with 2 miles to go. He says, how's things going? I said, I got good news and bad news. He said, what's the good news? I said, we're going to win the team up. I said, what's the bad news? I said, Maccabee's going sub 5:30 pace, and he's right behind you. He looks at me like, and you know how teammates are. Hey, it's okay. We want to win the national title, but I want to win the national individual title. Maccabee blows by him. There's nothing Tim can do. We weren't using gels. We were just drinking. It was that era, whatever. And Tim, and he goes by Tim, I can see this. I said, Tim, just stay on your feet, finish. Just stay on your feet. Maccabee runs 2:36.05. He ran the last 10K in 34.05 after going 6:06 pace. He was a freshman. He hadn't reached his 19th birthday yet. He was incredible. And at the finish line, he's Abhi Bikila in Tokyo. He's like dancing around doing calisthenics like he had not even been. And Tim comes across the line, and he's soaked in sweat. And then Doug holds on for 4th place. A guy from South Plains beat him. And I said, fellas, we don't have to break out a calculator. When you go 1, 2, 4 in a 3-man team score, we're national champions. So that was so important. And we're driving home, and this is the day before cell phones. And Maccabee's father had run 30 years prior for Coach Erdman at Hagerstown. He'd run in the early 1970s, and this was the year 2000. So we're driving home from East Lansing, Michigan. Alex, I said, does your dad even know? He says, no. So we have this big, gaudy national championship award, and then Tim has a nice plaque, and Alex has got a really big plaque as the national champion. And Doug made All-American too. He was 4th place. So it was just such a fun trip back. And we're driving, and I think we're in a gas station somewhere, probably in Ohio. He was going to call his dad. I said, don't tell him. Don't tell him yet. Yeah, don't tell him. So we got back to town. It's past midnight. And a little backstory, his father had a stroke. Between when he was a young runner and the year 2000, he had a stroke. And he had to deal with the ramifications of that. He wasn't in a wheelchair, but he had trouble getting around. And his heart was just filled with the fact that his son was doing so well. Not to the point where he had any idea his son was going to win the national championship and then lead his team to the first team championship in any sport. Still to this day, for the school. Still to today, it's the only team championship our school has ever won. And we've had a magnificent basketball program. We've had a legendary baseball program, but it's still the only team title. Yeah. So we get back to Hagerstown. I said, I want you to quietly, politely knock on your mom and dad's bedroom door. And when he's saying, everything's good, Dad, I want you to go in there and I want you to hand him that plaque. And 25 years later, we still talk about it. You know, that moment that Doug, his dad, will never ever forget. Oh my gosh, my son is national champion. And it was 10 years to the day. It was June 1st, 2000. 10 years to the day, Hagerstown, then now Community College, inducted both Tim Mason and Alex Maccabee into the Athletic Hall of Fame. And I was sitting there in the audience, and I couldn't help but shed a tear. What an amazing day that was for those guys. And Doug Oates became a police officer, and time is rolled by now, and he's almost close to retirement. I would read articles in the local newspaper about Doug would run down somebody would commit a crime and think they could jump over a fence and elude these fat donut eating police officers. That was never Doug. Doug could still run fast, and he's in his late 40s. There'd be articles in the paper about Doug running down Turkey, and the look on their face when some middle-aged police officer would run him down. So it was a great moment. But that's why the marathon became so significant. Terry Baker had won it in 74, and 26 years later, Alex Maccabee wins it. We win the team title. Now, sometime after that, I started coaching pros. I stepped in when I was working with the Gal Qualified Olympic Trials. My wife was finishing up her pro career in her late 30s, and I got out of collegiate coaching for a while. Somewhere along the line, they made the decision to drop it from a marathon to a half marathon.
Right.
And I can see the logic there. 18, 19-year-olds should not be running marathons. Half marathon is a more practical jump from cross-country 8K, 10,000 to the half marathon. So I agree with that philosophy. I don't know who made that decision. And they also, but I do agree with this, they moved the timing to after cross-country season. So after cross-country season, when everybody's doing high mileage, that's the time to run the marathon. So that's what they do now. Now the National Junior College Championships will be in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Central Iowa Community College is hosting. That'll be in Saturday, November 8th. And then they'll give them 2 days recovery, and they'll do the half marathon on Tuesday. The late, great Don Cox, who passed away within a year and a half, he was amazing. He was the one that brainchild the event that let's take the half marathon. And for budget reasons, most of these junior colleges have tight budgets. Instead of going to a separate championship and flying all this, take 48 hours rest and then do it on Tuesday. Now, that's not the most perfect taper, running an all-out 8K race against the best in the country on Saturday, but it's worked out really well. And we've had some great success in that. I had this kid, Iggy Chalker, at 19 years of age. He ran a 1:06 half marathon 4 years ago. And that's really what got coaches calling, the phones blowing up, calling me like, whoa, man, he ran a legitimate 1:06 on a certified course, and he's 19 years old. And I said, that's why the marathon is so important to us. And now it's the half marathon. And we'll go out there to nationals. I don't know if the administration is going to send our whole team yet. It depends on our ranking, but they'll definitely send our top guy. And we'll stick around for Tuesday for the half marathon too.
On your own personal other coaching adventures, how was your first selection? You've been on a lot of US national teams. How does that selection process go, and how are you informed, and what's all that about?
It's very interesting because I'm out there at the 1990 USA National Championships, Cerritos Community College, and the women's 10,000 meters at nighttime race going on. And Maria's qualified. She wasn't my wife yet. She was my girlfriend. We lived together. So I'm out there, and Greg couldn't go because of other commitments. And I went, and I'm hanging on the railing, 100 meters to go. And I'm yelling information through the whole race. And the top 10 finishers get some really nice perks. They get insurance. They get on the U.S. national team. They're given the title, U.S. national team. They get selected for one of the 4 teams for the U.S. Olympic Festival, which was going on at that time. So I'm coaching Maria through this race, and she runs spectacular. I could tell you exactly what she ran. She ran 33:52.30 in a tactical race. She kicked that last lap. She gets 9th place. She makes the national team, and nobody there knows who the hell she is. Everybody else ran for Power 5 conferences. Everybody else was, who is this girl? And they just assumed I was her coach. So I got identified with her. And next thing I know, my coaches' parties, I'm talking to the dudes. I'm talking to the people who are coaching the Olympic athletes, and I'm coming to rubbing elbows with them. So Maria makes the national team. She gets selected to go to Seoul, Korea in April of 1992. On the form she filled out, they said, do you have any coaching staff member selections that you think we should consider for this? So she nominated me. And the next thing I know, these people remembered who I was. My phone rings. And they said, do you want to go to Seoul, Korea? We're taking care of all the expenses. You'll get a stipend. They get U.S. national team uniforms, blah, blah, blah. And I played it cool. Actually, I'm like, just dancing around. And I'm going, let me check my schedule I'll get back to you. But they kind of said, well, get back to us soon because we got other people. I said, okay, hold on a minute. Let me just put you on hold for a second. Let me check my calendar. Of course, there was nothing on my calendar that was going to stop me. But I got to tell you, there was. The Olympic marathon trials were at the same time, and I had press credentials to be on the lead vehicle. Chris Fox, who Greg Scheck was coaching, was one of the favorites. Steve Spence, who ended up winning it. Steve was a friend of mine. I'd been helping Steve. When I say help, ride a bike with him, hand him a water bottle, call splits when he was running his 20 times a quarter, that kind of stuff. And I was going to have to miss that. I was going to have to miss the Olympic trials to be on this coaching staff. But I did. I went. Bud James, who we're still friends, he was the head coach. I think they called him the manager and they called me the team leader, whatever it was. But it was like he was the head coach and I was the assistant coach. And what an incredible experience. I'm 34 years old, coaching this US National team with Joe Nesbitt, who will end up making the Olympic team. It was just incredible. And I got to do all these duties that I've never done before. And one of them was I get called to this room. We're in this beautiful high-rise hotel in Seoul. I believe it was used for VIPs for the Olympics 4 years earlier. So I get called to this room. And USA Track and Field had told me, whatever compensation you get, you bring back. Okay? And I was like, okay, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I go in this room and I sit down with all these South Korean businessmen. They got their suits on. And I sit down and they're speaking English really well. And they're kind of like negotiating with me an appearance fee. And I didn't realize it at first. The one guy says $20,000. And the guys from USA Track and Field had told me, be very nice and don't, everything you do, be very cordial, whatever you offered. And I didn't know that there was a negotiating process going on here. So when they offered me $20,000, I was like, okay. So I thought the guy's going to give me a check or whatever, or an envelope, whatever. This machine spits out $20,000 and $100 bills. They put it into a little, like a briefcase, like the old doctor would carry around or something. I got $20,000 and $100 bills. I'm 34 years old. I've never seen this much money in all my life. My girlfriend are living in a $200 a month apartment. And I'm going back to the room. I'm like, please do not let me get robbed. So I get back to the room and I tell Bud, they gave me $20,000. I'm worried, like, how am I going to get back to the airport? $20,000 in cash. All these things are going through my mind. And he's kind of put my mind to these. You're not the first guy they've done this with. You're going to be fine, whatever. So competition takes place. And then the athletes are at a party. And then the coaches are at another party. And I'm upstairs. This coach, about 34 years old. And the coach from New Zealand national team, she's probably in her 50s. And she walks over to me, and we killed them. And we were fourth. I think it was the Kenyans, the Russians, a European team, and then we were fourth. And the girls got prize money, and they were all thrilled and all this. We passed out the prize money to them. They didn't know about this $20,000. Duffy Mahoney. Duffy had told me that money comes back to us. And I was like, okay. And I think at the technology of the year, it was fax. Like I faxed in Duffy, I got $20,000. That money comes back to us. And so I'm at this coach's party, and the coach of New Zealand comes over, and she says, "What did you get?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, "When you went in the room and negotiated your fee, you're the United States of America. What did you get?" And I go, $20,000. And she looked at me like I was the stupidest guy. Says, "We got New Zealand." She negotiated with. She's a former elite athlete. She's been on the coaching staff a number of times. And I went, "Oh my gosh!" And over the years, I've been talking. I've always went over my head. If I'm an honest man, I would have been an honest man. But I could have bumped that. If New Zealand, maybe they were going to give us 75 or 100. But I never told Duffy that. I never told Duffy that story. But that was fun. And then she was like, "Hey, you're a kid. You're going to learn, blah, blah, blah." So we're drinking a couple of drinks back here. But then I met the Kenyan coach who won. And the Kenyan coach, this is when I got my eyes opened. And I was having so much fun at this party. I'm pinching myself. Irene Swiazenska from Poland, the first woman to break the 50-second barrier in the 400.
Right.
She was one of the coaches for Poland. And I'm hanging out, and I got my picture taken with her, and it's just got him these legends. But I get chatting with the Kenyan coach, and he is a very arrogant guy who was probably 40, 45. And I don't know his background. And to be honest with you, I don't know his name. I said, "Did you pass out the money to the girls yet?" The purchase money. Everything was in cash. So I gave the money to our girls back at the hotel after the race was over. The prize money they had won. He looked at me once again with that look like, "Are you an idiot?" And I'm looking at him. And I go, and I don't know how much appearance fee he negotiated. Freaking Kenyan who win it. He took all their prize money. He says, we give the girls $100 of that money so they could go buy a dress or something. And my heart just broke that this is life-changing money for the families of these girls from Kenya. And you're stealing it. And in his mind, he wasn't stealing it. They gave him a trip. They got national team uniforms. They got international experience. They got good meals for the 7 days we were there. Then I went, I was just so bummed out. I was like, I was in downtrodden because I was thinking, gosh, I knew that the going rate was like $15. The US dollar stretched 15 times as far in Kenya at that time. So if a girl took back $10,000, he was taking $150,000. That was life-altering money for her and her family. And they stole that from those girls. They stole it from them. And at the same party, this Russian coach, he's trying to get me to do shots with him and buy him. And I'm not. I'm drinking Bud Lights, okay? Because I know what's good for me and what's not. Pounding back these vodka shots. And as he gets drunker and drunker, he starts revealing some stuff. Now, and he was bragging about how far ahead of the curve they were with us, with basically legal doping. And he told me a story about how the girls on the team, that they would artificially inseminate them, let them get the hormonal changes and benefits of a pregnancy, and then they'd abort them. And I almost threw up. I was so thrilled to go on this trip, and I got awakened to the real world, how the Kenyans were stealing money from their athletes and how the Russians were impregnating their 25-year-old athletes and then aborting them to give them the benefits of a pregnancy without taking it full term. I was just insane. It was an awakening to the real world. But that was my first trip in 92. Then 2 years later, I go back to Beijing. And once again, that was a real eye-awakening experience because Duffy, once again, he said, now this was the 93, the Chinese women had rewritten all the world records. And everybody knew it was dirty because the East German coaches, when the wall came down, went to China. So anybody knew. The men's record stayed the same. The women's rewrote the history of the sport. And he said, don't get debating with anybody. Keep your tongue quiet because you might not come home. You might end up in some kind of Chinese Beijing jail cell instead of come home if you open your mouth. Just an amazing experience. We sat at a state dinner in the Great People's Hall of China. I'm at the state dinner, and I was sitting at the same table with Zhuan Ma. Zhuan Ma was the guy who was coaching all these Chinese women who had broken all these records. And I'm looking at him, and I just wanted to say, hey, can you explain to me why the men's records haven't changed, but the women's records dropped all the way up? But I didn't say a thing. And we did the competition. I got on the plane and got out of there. And once again, you're like kissing the ground. And, it's the first time I'd ever been to a communist country where everything that you take for granted is not happening. Or I remember our interpreter who went around with us. I asked her how many children she had. She looked at me once again with this, are you dumb as a rock? She was only allowed to have one child. Yeah. And she shared her apartment with another family. I was like, wow, the things you take for granted. It was amazing. And then when Howard Nippert was America's best 100-kilometer runner for the better part of a decade. And Howard got his first 50-mile experience at the JFK. I'll remember, I can see him in the same room when I first talked to him. Howard had finished 21st in the Olympic marathon trials in 96. Started thinking about stepping up to the ultras in 97 and 98. He said, okay, let's do it. I think he may have done a 50K. We were the first 50-miler. I'm on an exercise bike, multitasking, and it's 8 o'clock at night. My phone rings. Mike Spinnler. And are you the JFK director? Yes, I am. And I'm answering questions, and it's Howard Nippert. And I recognize the name right away. I'm going, damn, this guy was an All-American at Virginia Tech, 21st in the Olympic trials. He's a stud. We want this guy in a race. I'm willing to waive his fee or whatever we got to do. We didn't have much of a budget, but a guy like that, I want to waive his fee. So he's talking to me. He says, can I talk to your elite athlete coordinator? And at the time, 1998, I'm doing every job. I'm picking dog turds up off the course the day after the race, okay? So I just joked with him. I said, hold on just a moment. And I acted like I was transferring the call. I go, Mike Spinnler, elite athlete. So we hit it off real well. We had common friends like Steve Taylor was his coach, and I knew Steve and Lori Taylor. So we hit it off real good. And Howard comes to JFK. He runs great. He wins the race. He breaks 6 hours, 5:58, which was a spectacular time in 1998. Now the guy's going to laugh at it. But that was a truly world-class time then. And Howard gets selected for the 100K team based on that performance, does really well at the 100K for a number of years. And then he calls me up. He wins JFK again in 2005. He breaks the Masters record, which still stands. He runs 5:51 as a 40-year-old. And a couple months later, we developed pretty good friendship. He says, hey, would you be interested in being on the coaching staff for the 100K team going to the World Championships? And I said, yeah, if I could swing it with my other responsibilities, yeah, I'd be very interested. So Howard got me on the 100K team. I did that for a while.
What about other drug use accusations of people beyond the established, starting with East Germany and the Chinese? What else was the hubbub in some of those international settings?
Those are the ones that stand out to me, the financial abuse. And actually, I was involved with another Kenyan athlete, Lazarus Nyakaraka, when Brooks was sponsoring the JFK in 1994. And I had a relationship with them. They asked me to do a couple favors. They asked me to go to the New York City Marathon. Of course, all my expenses were taken care of. And then work the expo. And then they had some Brooks athletes, Kenyan athletes who were floating around the country. They asked me to give them a place to stay. And I found a place to stay. My junior college guys were staying. During the summer months, they stayed there. I would drive them to the airport. I would take them to grocery stores or local butchers. And Lazarus Nyakaraka was 19 years old. And you know how people, oh, yeah, he's 19. But you could look at him and you look 19 years old. We'd have dinner. And me and my wife, Marie, were kind of like his surrogate guardians for that summer. And it was funny because when he told me he needed fresh meat, I took him to a local grocery store. And he was like, no, this isn't fresh meat. It's when you see the cattle walking around and you see the butcher slice its throat and then cut it up right there. So I was able to find a local butcher who, not quite that far back, but he was able to convince that was fresh meat. Lazarus, one night, we took him to a movie. He had never been to a movie theater. And if you can imagine, his first, he watches the movie, and it was a romantic comedy or something. And we walked out to the parking lot, and Maria, we didn't realize it was his first movie. So he's out there in the parking lot looking at the stars, 19-year-old Kenyan kid, Lazarus Nyakaraka. And that's how he told me to pronounce it, and that's how I still pronounce it 30 years later. He looked at me and Marie. He says, Marie, he says, I'm going to marry a beautiful American princess, because he just watched this romantic comedy. He's like, yeah, beautiful American princess, and I'm going to break the world record for 10 miles. And I was like, well, okay, all right, okay, fine. We take him home, drop him off. About a week or two later, Thomas Osana was his uncle and give him his workouts. So he says, can you take me to a local track? I said, yeah, I'll take you to a local track. It's raining. It's probably 10 days before Peachtree, late June, 1994. And so he says, I said, do you need any help? Do you need anybody holding the watch? He said, no, he didn't want me to be there. I could tell he did not want me to be there. So I said, oh, no problem. I'll come back. And then an hour and a half, pick you up. It's fine. So I drove to another little locale where he couldn't see me. And I watched him warm up. I watched him work out. I watched him run 6 times a mile, 6 times 1,600. Each one of them under 4:10. And he would walk for about 3 minutes in between and then go again. And the fastest high school time ever run on a track at that time, like 4:18. I just watched this guy break 4:10 6 times. And Chris Fox, who was a very good friend of mine, still is. I said, Chris, what does that indicate for 10,000 meters? A guy can easily break 28 minutes. So he goes to Peachtree and he places second place. Lazarus Nyakaraka. He goes to the following spring. Now, he already gone back home. And when he went home, all his prize money he had kept in that apartment for the summer. And I'm driving to the airport. And he wasn't going back with paper. In his 19-year-old mind, he wanted greenbacks. And I kept trying to talk him out of it. Couldn't do it. We went to the local bank. He got all his prize money. It was over $40,000 in cash and $100 bills. And they put it in a little carrying case. And I took him to the airport. And he flew back to Kenya with that $40,000 plus dollars, which in my mind was worth like $600,000. His family's going to be able to buy a farm. He was going to change everybody's life. And he goes back. At that point, it wasn't like we had cell phones, or I didn't even have the internet. I lost track with him. And I noticed his name was not showing up on results. And I didn't know why. I didn't see his results, name and results, until Cherry Blossom the following spring. Cherry Blossom, 1995. The first 2 finishers became the first 2 human beings to break the 46-minute barrier for 10 miles. Lazarus was second place. What he had told me in the parking lot the summer before, that he was going to break the world record 10 miles, came to fruition. I don't think he ever married a beautiful American princess. I think he did pretty well. But I found out what happened was when he got back, the Kenyans wanted the money. That's our money. No, it's not. It's my family's money. They banned him from all national teams. He could not represent Kenya in the World Cross Country Championships. He wasn't eligible to try out for the 1996 Olympic team. He made that conscious decision to help his family and gave up his career. Now, Thomas Osano, who was a great agent and great world-class runner, was able to get him out of the country. And he set up a training camp in Mexico. And as years went on, then he ended up being a manager and managing Kenyan athletes. But that just was another example. The Kenyans took away his Olympic dream to try to steal his money, and he held his ground and wouldn't do it. So every time I hear about a Kenyan runner running for one of those oil-rich countries in the Middle East, I think to myself, you know what? I agree with what they're doing. They're doing that because, you know what? I'm not going to give you the money. I'm not going to let you do that. The corrupt system in Kenya. Now, I don't know where it's at now. I don't know where it's at. We know that the current women's world record holder in the marathon has received a 3-year suspension for drugs. We know that it's a corrupt system. She's not the one going out and getting those drugs. We know that. We know how that works. And that's the point of angering me. It just saddens. It saddens me. If you look at Kim, I don't know whatever happened to Chuck the Buse, but I'm like, this woman died when she was 41 of cancer, and you may have had a really, she got a silver medal in LA and a bronze medal in Seoul. You might have cost her 4 decades or 5 decades of her life by doing that. Because those athletes they'll do what a coach tells them to do. They believe in their coaches. And it's what so saddens me about them. Every time I hear about a Kenyan woman, somebody says, dirty drug cheat. He's not. It's the ones that profit from them. Those managers and those coaches and probably the governing body are the ones profiting from their appearance fees and their prize money. So it's sad. Chris Fox and me have been friends. We ran against each other in high school, and we've been friends for 50 years. We both just celebrated our 67th birthdays within the last 2 weeks. And we've compared notes over the years. And I'm a little sometimes naive. And Chris has lived that world. Chris was a 21.60 5,000 meter runner in 1983, sub 4 minute miler, ran 27:53 for 10,000 meters when he was 36 years old to make the world championship team. And he's seen a lot more than me. And I'm not going to throw names out. I'm going to leave names out. But he pointed the finger at some American runners over the last few decades from the 1980s forward. And he seems to know a lot better than I do. But all I can just say is that sometimes at the end of the day, I know I'm clean. I know I was clean in my day. Heck, I was so worried in my day because they tested, there was certain amounts of caffeine. You could have too much caffeine in your system. They shouldn't have done away with that. But I can remember I was drinking diet sodas. It was a stupid thing. To try to stay light, I was drinking diet sodas. And I would be like, okay, I got to be careful how many diet sodas I drink because I might go over that excessive number in caffeine. But you like to believe. And there's certain people, I'll look at this, some American guy will do something and I'll say, you know what? I fully believe that they are clean, but I wouldn't bet my children's lives on it. I wouldn't go that far. There. The motive to cheat is there.
Absolutely. It's interesting what you said about the money. Thinking about it that way, it just occurred to me, money, good and bad. Money's come into the sport, provided for some athletes life-changing opportunity, but it's also in the wrong places. It just made it harder on some athletes where the administration it's another level of abuse. I remember being at the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, and Marion Jones was still married to her shot putter husband, who very soon after, right then, was busted with drugs. And just listening to her, so sincere, talking about not taking drugs and just being crushed later, just being in the presence of somebody so sincere, defending themselves, saying, I gotta divorce this guy. He's a druggie, not my thing. And then finding out later, that is a crushing thing that I still look back on that just experience of saying, boy, it's easy to believe.
Yeah. I got to tell you, my wife she was on the US national team. So she has those experiences too. And she had a really good feel for who was and who wasn't. And I saw her run. I saw Marion Jones run in the Olympic trials in 1992 when she was a high school kid. She just missed the team. I think she was 4th in the 200 as a high school kid. So I thought she was a phenomenal talent. So when she was doing what she was doing, she had that break where she played basketball. And then 97, she's back on the scene, wins the US championships and wins the world championships. And we're out there in Indianapolis. And Maria, we got a picture of her holding our baby, our oldest son, who's now going to be 29 in December. She was holding Willie, and we got a picture of her holding Willie. And Maria was like, had this look on her face. And I was like, she says, I don't think she's clean. And I say, you know, she said, I just have this feeling. And gosh, all those years later, Maria was right. And I was, no, she's clean. She's a phenom. She ran 22 point when she was a high school kid, blah, blah, blah. And I was really disappointed too. I was very disappointed. Yeah. And even like in the bicycle racing world, I held out hope for Lance Armstrong. But after a while, it was like, no, I don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. But then unfortunately, when you get the Grant Fishers, and I fully believe that Cole Hawker is doing it the right way, the general public will say, yeah, but so it's just too unfortunate that the athletes who are really doing it the right way aren't getting the full credit they deserve.
We just lost an American sprinter, and they're going to have the enhanced games.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy time.
And all this will be written about 50 years from now with a different perspective. Yeah.
I've had the coaches come to me over the years and, oh man, don't you want to be coaching at a Power 5 conference? Don't you want to do this? And part of me, the time's marched on. They're not going to hire a 67-year-old guy to do that. I don't know. Belichick. Somebody told me recently, what are you talking about? Belichick sent me a multi-million-dollar contract. I said, you got a good point there. But I coach at the local junior college that I ran for 49 years ago. And I'm helping kids who are trying to get their educations paid for, trying to get a little better. And they're not dreaming of shoe company contracts or prize money. And it's a refreshing. It's almost like a throwback back to a different era. Because even at the next level, I mean, I know coaches. Eastern Kentucky recently had a kid they were going to lose, I believe, to Oregon for a lot of money, a lot of Nike money. And then Corey Erdman, I'll give him great credit. Corey is a lawyer, and he learned the craft, and he went in there, renegotiated with another shoe company, I believe it was Hoka, and got enough money out of Hoka that he was able to retain this elite level Division I athlete. But it's the world we're living in. I don't know if I'd enjoy that. Some of these coaches that are bailing out of other sports because of the NIL thing, I can understand it, that, hey, you're not going to stop it. And I'm not going to preach against it, but it's just, maybe it's my time to step out and let a different generation come along.
Yeah. Ludenkus, the 800-meter guy, he's forgone his junior and senior year as a pro. Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know about you, Matt, but some of my fondest memories were road trips with your high school teammates and road trips with your college teammates.
You just mentioned it one or two times as we went along. Trips in the van and the relationships that are made. That's a part. It's very cool to hear you reflect on some of these relationships that are so many decades old and all those fun stories and jokes and laughter that happens in overcrowded rooms, overcrowded, stinky vans. And that's a part of this whole thing for the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, Cooper Lutenhout, he's going to fly first class everywhere.
No, he done that. Yeah, he won't turn right on any planes from now on. And so I've got a lot of people on here that have had different careers, and I've talked to people from all levels, even people just had a high school career or a little bit in college and did other things. And some people have been coaches, and there's people that are athletic organizers and timing companies and everything. So it's really nice. On behalf of the whole running community, you've contributed so much, not only having a great career and interacted with people and done the right things the right way, but done so much with the running club, with the JFK race, and your just ongoing support of youth and higher level people. So just thanks on behalf of the whole running world for everything you've done. Really appreciate it.
Matt, I will thank you for all those kind words, but I want to tell you, once again, my wife is a very devout Catholic, and I go to church with her every Sunday. But I'm kind of a skeptic. I'm still trying to figure out the total universe thing. I look up in the sky, but I don't know if it was somebody creating this for me or whether I was just so lucky or blessed. But my father was just this amazing man and said the right things to me at the right time. And when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to make a living, how I was going to pay the bills, he said, whatever you do, just make sure when you put your head on a pillow at the end of the day, you feel good about what you did that day. And now, when you say that to a 20-something-year-old kid, you're like, oh, would you shut up, old man? I want to drive a nice car. And I want to have a nice apartment. But that stuff sunk in, and he was right. So I do feel like that. Now that I'm at that twilight part of my life, I feel good about what I've done in my life. And then even what I do today, I feel good about what I'm about. I really appreciate your kind words.
Wow. I feel really good about spending time with you. It was really inspiring and uplifting to spend time with you, Mike. So thanks for all your time.
Hey, Matt, hopefully our paths cross. If you run into any of those Molnar, those stars from the past, you tell them that, hell, they were my heroes, man.
Yeah. I will. I have a high school reunion, 50th high school reunion coming up next year back in Johnstown. Steve Molnar he lives in his mom's house. I don't know if his mom's still alive.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a cell phone either. So I did a chat with him. It didn't work out well. So I've got to figure out a way to legally record a phone call, just a landline phone call, and tell him, hey, I'm recording this phone call. It's not illegal. I'm in Canada, but
Yeah.
I did have a chat with Steve. John Molnar was good. And I wasn't the fastest kicker.
Yeah.
But John Molnar was one of the strongest runners in our town and in our county.
Yeah.
And I could outkick him every time. So all I had to do was beat everybody but John Molnar and be with him. And so, I'm sorry, buddy. I got this one from here out. Usually I'm worried about somebody else coming. But Steve was a robot in the city. Everybody in Johnstown, he would go out on those 20-mile runs, it seemed 6 days a week. And he would you just see him anywhere all over greater Johnstown.
Yeah. Matt, when me and you were coming up, the 2:08 was the marathon world record for so long. If a guy ran 2:16, he was like, this guy is great.
Yeah.
And now if the guy's 2:16, you're saying maybe you can sneak into the Olympic trials. Anyway, if you chat with him, I doubt if he remembers my name, but you tell him he was a great inspiration for me back in the day.
Will do.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, good talking to you, buddy.
All right. Thanks
All right.
again.
All right, stay in
Okay.
contact. Stay in contact. I'll watch you on Facebook. Bye now.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.